Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Welcome, everybody. I'm pleased to introduce you to Phuong Luong, my guest today. Phuong is a certified financial planner and founder of Just Wealth, a virtual fee-only financial planning practice serving moderate-income clients. Previously, she was the director of financial services for a national nonprofit managing the recruitment, hiring, and training of financial counselors. She also trains organizations on building effective and culturally relevant financial programs for marginalized communities and provides education on structural economic inequality. Her first career was as a math educator, special education case manager, and curriculum developer for public schools throughout New England. Phuong is a member of CFP, Board's Council on Education, and the Center for Financial Planning's Diversity Advisory Group to build recruitment pathways for planners from underrepresented communities and to retain them in the profession. Phuong earned a BA from Dartmouth College and an M.Ed in special education from Boston University. She completed the financial planning program at Boston University. Welcome, Phuong, and thank you for joining me from your office in Boston, Massachusetts.
Thanks for having me, Tammy. This is really cool that I get to spend this time with you.
I am so excited to have you. So, full disclosure, Phuong and I have worked together.
Yes.
Several times, and we have taught together, and we make a really good team. And when I found out that you had a few different careers before your current one, it felt like a really good opportunity for us to talk more about your background and how you made the decisions that you made to get to where you are now. So since this is a podcast about career transitions and about finding more fulfilling and satisfying and meaningful work, I'd like to ask you, so could you tell me a little more about what fulfillment and satisfaction in your work means to you? What does that look like?
That's a really good question. And I think the first word that comes out to me is impact, right? What impact am I having? And that's always been the driver for me. When I started working, and it's okay if I jump into that now?
Absolutely.
When I started working after college, I was a teacher. I was a public school teacher. And from day one, even before I stepped foot in the classroom, I remember we had an activity to create a portfolio, a teaching portfolio that we'd bring into interviews with us. And one of the first things that would have to be in the front when you opened our portfolio was our teaching manifesto, right? Why do we want to be a teacher? Well, actually, they called it our teaching philosophy. And I worked really hard on that. And it cemented the reasons that I went into teaching, and it was to clear barriers to opportunity. Because I realized, I wasn't being a teacher so I could teach students a specific thing, right? I wanted them to love learning. I wanted them to realize that they're capable of success, that they, that education in itself is not the end, right? It's a means to an end, that it can help you reach your goals, and that anyone can learn whatever they want to learn. And so I realized that, and it hasn't, that philosophy hasn't ended. That still drives me in what I do as a financial coach. And that's actually how you and Tammy, you and I met, because you actually were teaching the first financial coaching training that I went to. And it was awesome, right? And it really opened my eyes to, wow, okay, this teaching background that I have and the financial coaching role that I'm going into, they're really connected, because that philosophy of clearing barriers runs in both fields. And now I'm a financial planner. I started my own practice a year ago, and we can talk more about the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So this theme for you, or this desire to make an impact, started off in a teaching career, and now you are self-employed. Tell me more about the path that you took between, what made you decide to, let's say, leave teaching and make your impact in other ways? Because I know you had at least one or two other roles in between those positions.
Yeah. So when I left teaching, it was a really tough decision, and it took maybe like a year and a half, 2 years of me really searching. Do I really want to do this? Right? Do I really want to leave? Because I had gotten my teaching certification in college. I did a lot of teaching internships. I did a full year of a teaching internship in a special education classroom. I got my master's in special ed. So at the point when I had left, I had been teaching for, I would say, 8 years, like 7, 8 years, even though I was still pretty young in my career. And I left because of that whole impact thing that I talked about, right? I realized that there were huge structural inequalities at play in our schools that stem from structural inequalities outside of school, right? And a lot of what I'm talking about are the economic inequalities and poverty. And it
So
was a
those are the
crisis.
structural, when you say structural inequalities, you're talking about economic inequalities, things like
Yeah,
poverty and and so you felt that you couldn't have an impact on those things from being from within the school system. Is that right?
yeah, definitely. I feel like I felt like I had some impact, right? Building relationships with students, with their parents. But I felt like the amount of energy and time and just heart that I was putting into the work, that a fraction of that effort was actually bringing, fulfillment to my students and their families. And I felt like I was making an impact in their lives, but they didn't see all the behind the scenes of me staying with my co-teachers at the time, because other teachers were staying this late, staying until 8, 9 p.m. sometimes when we've been at school since 7 a.m. Right? The effort that we were putting in was being eaten up by standardized testing, bureaucracy, paperwork. And as a special educator, I was doing double, sometimes triple the amount of standardized testing that classroom teachers had to do, because I had to do special ed testing. So I was writing a lot of reports, looking at a lot of data. And, it was so clear to me looking at the data. And then I look at the data and then I look at who's succeeding year after year and who's not succeeding on these standardized tests, right? That the state was providing to everybody, but also my special ed testing materials. It was the students who came from poverty. And
Yeah.
typically in Boston and Cambridge, where I taught, it's the students of color, because of how race and class are so tied in America.
Mm.
Um, and I'm a practitioner at heart, and I felt like I was hitting a wall, because what I was doing day to day wasn't having an impact on a general level. And I worked on it a lot in therapy, journaling, doing career exercises where you map your values with your passions. Right? I read different books, and I landed in financial planning. Yeah, that's how it happened.
Thank you for sharing the different avenues you pursued in order to make this decision. It sounds like you spent at least a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
deciding that not just that this wasn't meeting your goals in terms of impact, but that also you really gave yourself some solid time to think about, well, what's next then, and how do I get there, and who am I being?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It took a lot of time, because there was a lot of identity wrapped into being a teacher, right? So like it fit. I felt like my personality molded into who I became as a teacher. Like it kind of like, myself and my work and my job, I should say, kind of grew together. So it was like, teachers, you're inherently trustworthy, right? They're like, I remember telling people I'm a teacher, and they're like, "Oh, that's so noble." And sometimes it would like annoy me, but like, yeah, you're right. I'm a noble person. It's like it in a way it fed who I believed I am, right? And
Yeah.
it's like a good person. I do good in the world, impact, all that stuff. And also the teacher education programs really, motivate you to adopt that persona as well, right? Like we're change makers.
Right.
And it was really, really, really hard for me, because I felt like inside I didn't feel like I was making a difference. But on the outside, people were like, "Wow, you're making such a difference." Actually,
Mhm.
I can say objectively that the structural inequalities, like if I stayed in teaching for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I think I could have stayed and made an impact, but I really don't think I could have lasted that long because of how burnt out I was. And maybe I chose the wrong track, and choosing being in special ed, but it's a really rough, it was a really rough career for me, right? For some people, I remember having mentors or working with special educators with 20, 30 years experience, and they loved it. They loved coming to the room every day. They loved coming to school, I should say, not to the room, but and they're really, really, really good at what they do. And I started realizing toward the end, before I left, I realized they're really good. I don't know if I have the motivation to get to that level because of all the other stuff in the back of my head that got in the way during the school day.
So there were a number of things going on for you at that time, and you realized this just isn't it for me. And you were surrounded by people who, for them, it was their it. It was their deeper purpose, their sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in their work. And you were not experiencing that. And yet there is this sort of societal view of what a teacher is. And I think that it sounds like that you were definitely attached to that image, that made sense to you, so much so that you went back to school and got a master's, right?
I did. Yeah. So I taught math and science for a year for someone who was on maternity leave. And that was and then I went back to get math. So that my plan was to get a master's all along.
Okay.
So I got a master's in special education, and then I taught math and special ed for 4 years. And then my last year the last year, I took a sabbatical. I took a year off, right, to see what I could do. But I had already planned to work as in the financial services world in some capacity. And I landed in financial services, and I say that more broadly because eventually I landed in financial coaching and planning, what I do now. But I chose financial services because I there's this internal struggle that I have, right, between my idealism and the change I want to see in the world, and then you need to make a living and handle my own financial stress and need for
tell us about that, because I think you're hitting a nail on a head for a lot of people who may have the desire to choose a different pathway and yet have other very practical life kinds of concerns that really get in the way of them making some of those choices. So it sounds like you gave yourself this sabbatical this year to really explore those. So tell us more about how you did that.
Sure. So when I was mapping out what other careers I could do, and at that point, I had been saying I'm going to be a teacher for life for the rest of my life for 10 years. I really thought that's it. This is a career. I remember graduating college and people going, "Oh," and I already had a job. I had a teaching job before I graduated. I remember my classmates being so jealous of me, like, "Oh, you know exactly what you want to do. I'm so jealous." And so it was really, really hard for me to make the change. But the reason I landed in financial services was, I think it stems from my own upbringing. I had a lot of anxiety growing up, social anxiety, public speaking, but also a lot of financial stress. And so I always thought, I need to feel some kind of financial control. And so actually, it seems like a big jump from teaching to financial services. But while I was earning my teaching license in college and throughout grad school, I was reading personal finance books in my spare time. Tons of them. I read them all. I remember I wrote up a list right around the time I was thinking of leaving teaching, because I started kind of blogging, writing articles for myself, and I realized I'm just going to make a list of all the personal finance books I've read. And I think there were like a few dozen on there, just in a matter of like a few years, which is a lot. And then also like countless blog articles, all that stuff. So I was just learning a lot during this whole time. And I realized, okay, maybe this is something that can help other people, because I've never actually thought of incorporating that into a job. And here's something that I read recently, and I like it a lot. And so I'm gonna talk about it here.
Sure.
I think what I started landing on is that I could still do good while earning a living and controlling my own time. I could still do good in the world while also earning a living and doing and having autonomy over my work and how I spend my time. Right. And I realized that that what I was mixing up, right, was the difference between work, income, and a job.
Ah,
Yeah.
work, income, and a job. Say more about that.
So 3 different things, right? So income is money coming in.
Right.
That's that's money we need, right, to pay for expenses, pay for our goals. And then job is what you do to get money, right? But it's working for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Your true work is aligned with your purpose, and you don't have to get paid for that. For some people, they can align all 3. Their work in life is their job and they get paid for it. And they're incredibly lucky. But not everyone can do that.
You mean in terms of that alignment you were just talking about?
Yeah, not everyone can do that. Not everyone can do that, and I feel like that's what I'm doing right now, right?
Yeah.
And again, it doesn't always align, but in what I do now in my business, I've structured it so that there's a part of my business that I get paid to do. That's my job.
Yep.
I also do a lot of volunteer work. Some with communities and individuals, but some also changing those structural things that I talked about before.
Right. Your committee work and what?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. All the things that you talked about in my bio, all that. And I also do other things related to progressive groups. In Boston, I organized an event where people could learn how to divest their savings, and also how institutions could learn to divest pension funds and larger institutional funds from private prisons and the private prison industry.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really great event. And people learned about how to do that. And it took a lot of time. And there was a group of volunteers that I was working with, and I really took the lead on that because I had the time and autonomy to do that, right? I could write emails in the middle of the day. I could take some time in the middle of the day to, check out the venue and the space. And it's a gift for me right now, but in a way too, I struggle day to day with not feeling like there's a direction. Yeah, I feel that every once in a while. And Tammy, you and I have talked about that too. When you're a teacher, or if you're in a career track working, and this probably is something that maybe most business owners feel, is like, what am I building right now? Like what is my goal? And income has never been a driver for me, which sometimes is a problem.
Yeah.
Because it's such a clear goal to have.
Yeah.
And everything can fall into place, right? If I knew exactly how much I wanted to make per year, I could figure out how many clients I need to bring in, what revenue streams I need. But
you're an expert in that. You have all the skills and the tools to be able to figure those things out. And yet what I'm hearing is that this goal, this drive within you is all about impact. It's about that impact. And so whether you are engaged in paid activities or unpaid activities, if you're fulfilling that need or that aim to have that impact, that's your driver. Whereas for some people, the driver might be more financial dollars and cents, or creating other pathways for stable living, let's say. Especially I think of people who have a family and are financially responsible for other people, and it's a huge things, right?
It's a huge privilege that I have, right? But it's also, so I'm very lucky. I'm not supporting a family. I'm very frugal. And because I can be, I don't have major health issues.
Right.
And also I've studied this. I've studied frugality.
Right.
And I'll recommend some books later if people are interested in reading more.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Some books that have changed my life, honestly.
Yeah.
Reading them, and I wouldn't be here today and able to own my own business and have that startup capital to be able to do that without the principles that I've learned from those books I've read. But it's not all about personal knowledge and skills, right? It is about context. And I think, something that I do want to talk about is what inspires me.
Yeah.
It's something you would ask me to think about. So it really breaks my heart when someone thinks that they don't have control over their own life. It really breaks my heart. And I think I feel like you are in line with that, right? So that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And, I don't mean to say that anything and everything is possible in someone's life, but I think that
Right.
being realistic about your own strengths and the internal and external barriers is very important.
Mm.
What I think our society does a good job of is shifting the external barriers, the very real ones, shifting those barriers to the individual, saying that it's their fault and that they're not academically, professionally, or financially successful because of things that they have done or haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
And, in talking about the education world, we see this in the whole grit and resiliency movement that's happening in education.
Yeah.
Right? Like work harder, like feel like, and when you compliment students, don't say that you're smart, say, wow, you're working so hard.
Yeah.
And I believe it. Hard work is important. But again, we're shifting responsibility onto children for being resilient in a very harsh world for many of them. Right? Where so many children live in poverty, when 3 times the number of Black and Hispanic children live in poverty compared to white children. Right? We're not talking about that when we talk about resiliency and grit.
Right.
And so that's why I think that's why I love the coaching phrase. And Tammy, you'll be proud of me for bringing this up. People are creative, resourceful, and whole.
Woohoo!
And I always believe that.
Yeah.
So I think that applies to why I became a teacher, right? Clearing the barriers. I'm not helping kids figure out what they want to do because they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
They'll know what they want. I don't know what they want. They have to figure that on their own, but I can clear barriers. That's my role. And I see that as a financial coach and planner and educator now.
Right. And you see it, when you said earlier, I don't know if I should have become a teacher. And yet I would say that becoming a teacher is exactly what led you to where you are now. I want to talk about the I guess I'm calling it the in-between space. I don't know why. You went from teaching, you took a sabbatical. Did you go back to teaching after the sabbatical, or was the sabbatical really that pivot point for you? And what did you do during that year?
So it was a sabbatical because I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to teaching or not. So luckily, I was very fortunate that my school district at that time, you could take a 1-year leave of absence and come back, and your position would still be there for you.
Yeah.
And so I was really testing out. I was seeing, do I want to make a shift? And I started working as a financial coach at a nonprofit, and it was eye-opening for me.
I see. So you went right from teaching to the nonprofit because you had said, it's funny. You said financial services. My first thought is to think of, investment
like
firms or, Fidelity, Merrill Lynch. And
I knew I never wanted to do that.
And I was sort of wondering when you said financial services, where did she go?
Yeah.
So you went right to the nonprofit. So you were working with primarily low and moderate income populations then, right?
Yes, I was. And and I think that was the year that I took your training, the financial coaching training.
Oh, that was your sabbatical. Okay. I knew you when.
Yeah. And so it wasn't such a dramatic shift because I actually started working at the nonprofit, I should say, part-time in my last year of teaching.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was working weekends and nights.
Wow.
And I also started doing the certified financial planning program online.
Oh, okay.
So it was a very busy 2 years, very busy years. And then during that sabbatical time, quote unquote sabbatical, right? It was like, because I was working, studying all that. I took the certified financial planning exam. That was a really intense time of studying, and I passed it. And then I earned my certification a year ago because you need an experience. You need the hours, the experience requirement. So that year was great. That year was really, really good.
So while you were studying and it sounds like for a while there, you were working 2 jobs and then taking your sabbatical. During that process, it must have been reassuring to know that you had something to fall back on. You could go back to teaching, and yet you were learning all kinds of new things. You were going into the financial planning program, the certification. and studying for the exam, did it still feel like this is right? Was there some kind of, we call this podcast work from the inside out, right? I'm
Yeah.
wondering internally, were you saying to yourself, I feel more grounded, or I feel, like this is the right thing? Or were you still sort of puzzling yourself with those questions?
Oh yeah. I was still feeling like, there were days where it was the weekend, and I'd be home studying about like different measures of investment growth and return.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this and I'm like, I'm never going to use this. Like, am I ever going to use this? Like, what am I studying here? And like, I remember like thinking like, what am I doing? Oh yeah. I totally felt that. Like, is this what I really want to do? And I just finished it. I just wanted to finish it. Right. Cause I think part of my personality is that I find a track. Because it's just, I think maybe, because of like different anxiety or like feelings, being very uncomfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah.
I wanted to be on a track, and I chose that track. And luckily, I've found a way to make the track that I'm on now work for me in many ways.
Yeah.
And it's been very fulfilling meeting other colleagues. But I realized too that there's so many different ways of doing the work.
Yeah.
And that's what allowed me to push through. I've met other people with their certification who do a lot of different things. And so at the nonprofit, there was a professional there, and he's still there. He's a certified financial planner. He's a consultant there now. He's not working full time anymore. And I met him, and I thought, oh, you could have the certification and work in a nonprofit. And so that's what made me realize that there are different career tracks that are available.
Right.
And it was still really nerve-wracking. I still think today, right? Is this right? Is this what I want? I'm starting to wonder if that's just me. I'm always gonna feel that way.
Well, and yet I guess I'm thinking about the lens that you look through as you've made these decisions along the way, and you've made lots of choices along the way. And I commend you for someone who really likes stability or isn't all that comfortable with uncertainty. There are some people who are comfortable with uncertainty, and yet you've continued to pursue and make changes under the lens, or looking through the lens of impact. Would you say that where you were and where you are now, that you are at least fulfilling that impact more? Has the lens come into more focus?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it's grown, that's a great question. And it's grown in different ways. So the lens has come to more focus, but as I've gotten older, I've realized how big the problem really is. How much bigger it is. And it makes me feel like the impact that I can have individually is just such a small portion of what needs to change.
Yeah. You mean the problem you're pointing to are, the structural inequalities that you were pointing to. I know there's many of them. It's
right.
I'm using that as a general term, but
historically, and that have just gone on for generations.
Yeah.
Like we're not going to solve this in our lifetime.
No.
And we have to do whatever we can, but what's the biggest impact that I can make? And I still haven't figured that out yet, but it's required me to really jump out of my comfort zone. And so I have been doing more public speaking, sharing my story, sharing my beliefs, and you've encouraged me to do a lot of that too. And I mentioned before, I had a lot of social speaking anxiety. Well, social anxiety and public speaking anxiety, two different things. Social anxiety being in large groups.
Yeah.
Which I'm constantly in right now. And public speaking, which I'm doing more and more of.
Yeah.
Because I think my message resonates with people because I've thought about it a lot, and I can frame it, I think, in a way that's clear to people because of my education background.
Right.
And I think about it a lot. So I've made mistakes, and I talk about it with friends to test out some ideas. And when they ask me questions when things don't make sense. So I'm constantly like revising how I share things, because because I know when I talk about some of the stuff, like speaking about the difficulties of being a teacher, speaking about, my views around grit and resiliency and how I think that it's very limited theory.
Yeah.
Both structural barriers, racism, poverty, it can put people on edge. And I've had people who are very defensive about it.
Yeah.
For one way or the other, for one reason or the other. And I've realized that I have to tailor my message to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Being a financial planner allows me to do that without feeling like I have to be perfect in all, and perfect in all ways, right? Because here's the reason. Because my job is not tied to my income. No, my work, I should say, is not tied to my income. My job is doing the different coaching trainings that I do with you, Tammy.
Yeah.
It's working directly with clients who don't know a lot of my personal mission.
Right.
They don't know this. Like they know me, and I bring myself into our meetings, and I know that I never judge them, for any financial decision making they've done in the past or will do. So they keep coming back, right? So I'm having a good time working with clients. But my work in talking about structural inequality, talking at workplaces, talking at schools, at all levels, high school, all the way to the college level, I don't like that. That's not my job. And so I can separate it and I can take more risks that way.
And by being self-employed, you have the flexibility to do all those things because, I was just thinking that when you were with the nonprofit, you were having an impact. There was an opportunity to have the kind of impact that took you, away from teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm hearing is that the being self-employed gives you many more options and choices to both have the impact where you want to have the impact, but also to be able to reach probably an even more diverse, broader audience.
Definitely. When I'm talking about this message, I am talking about it with people who are in the business world, in financial services, many of who have not heard of the different structural inequalities that we're talking about.
Right.
And not because they don't care about them, because they've just never learned them.
That's right. There's a lot of, I think that there's a lot of people out there, myself included, who still have a huge learning curve with all this. And I think you'd even say that for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot more work for you to do. No doubt about it. You're not done.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a news flash. But I'm wondering, you talked about some books that you read that really had a huge impact on you. And I wondered if you could, mention a few of those that you think that maybe some members of our audience might also find particularly useful.
Yeah. The book that changed my life and that I read right after grad school was Your Money or Your Life. And the authors are Vicki Robbins and Joe Dominguez. And it's an amazing book. What it does is it's really like the why of money. Why of money. And it talks about the how, right? Where it encourages you to track everything you're spending, do an inventory of how much you've earned in your life. Just just come to terms with your financial situation as is. But then once you track, you're really taking a look at aligning your spending with your priorities. And they're asking you to ask yourself 3 questions when you look at your spending. Did I receive fulfillment, satisfaction, and value in proportion to the life energy spent? Because every dollar you earn relates to life energy. You had to spend your time, which is a limited, precious resource, to earn that dollar. Right? So did you receive fulfillment based on the proportion of how much time you spent in your life?
Right.
2 is this expenditure of life energy in alignment with my values and life purpose? And 3, how might this expenditure change if I didn't have to work for a living?
The big question everybody asks themselves, right?
Yeah. And part of what I've realized doing this exercise is that my job was costing me money. Being full-time employed, right? There's a paycheck, but there are different costs to being in a job, right? You have to get professional clothing, you have to get trainings. There's the therapy bill sometimes, depending on what job you're in.
Right. There's a lot of A lot of different
Yeah.
wear and tear on one's soul, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's exactly why I'm doing this podcast, is because I think there are a lot of people out there who, for a whole lot of very, very good reasons, are selling their souls day in and day out in jobs that they don't find particularly interesting or fulfilling, or in organizations where they don't feel like that it's really a good fit. And
Right.
yet, when you think about how many hours, how many days, how many years we spend at work, it does seem like there's got to be another way. And I think that's, your example is a brilliant one for that, in terms of reorganizing your mental frameworks around money and around how you're using your time, your energy, and then where your income needs to come into that to sustain yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, in terms of thinking about the people who may be listening to this, what would be your best advice for them in terms of even considering making some sort of a change?
Yeah. Well, along with the deep reflection and questioning that people are going to do anyway, try a exercise where you're tracking your spending and where it's going now and how much money is coming in. This is different from a budget. So a budget is aspirational. A budget is putting limits on yourself on different categories of spending, like shopping or eating out, all that. I'm not interested in that, because that's fiction.
Yeah.
What you want to do is really track and see how much you're actually earning and where it's going. And then once you have that information, and you can do it for, I typically use a monthly view of this.
Yeah.
Do it for at least a month. If you can do it for 2 or 3, even better. So you can get an average, because not every month is the same. Then you can concretely put yourself in the life where you want to be, right? Take that, make a copy of it. You either writing it out or doing it in a spreadsheet, it doesn't matter. Use the same template, and then envision yourself, how much would each of these areas cost if you made the switch? What would change? What would need to change, right? And here's the thing: when I did this, I realized that some of those things were some of those expenses would increase. Right. Not everything needs to decrease. Some of it might increase. Right. Something
like healthcare, or
exactly healthcare, or things that you choose to increase. So, for example, part of when I left my full-time job last year, I started traveling. I've always wanted to travel. I'd never done, extended travel before. And I went to Asia. I went to Asia for about 3 months. And I realigned my spending. I shifted a lot of spending into travel. I still traveled pretty frugally. And I scratched that itch, and I realized it was exhausting, and I don't want to do that again. But I scratched that itch, right?
Right.
And now, and then I just knew it.
Yeah.
But I did. And it was, and that was another moment where I was like, oh, now what? Right. Like I thought that I was gonna be maybe, someone who would travel and work at the same time. I think like they're like digital nomads, but I realized that's not for me.
Yeah.
So that now I have to realign, things, or just reflect on what I want to do now.
Yeah.
But that is what I did. Right. And so I took a look at the budget, and I said, okay, what if I did this? But when you're traveling for 3 months, living in countries outside the US, depending on where you're living, your cost of living can go down significantly.
Yeah.
So I used some miles for the flights. So that was really good. And I lived very frugally, eating out, living in a modest accommodations. And I actually spent less living in Asia than I typically do living in Boston.
Yeah. Well, that's not that hard to imagine.
Yeah, it's not. It's not, right? And then people ask me all the time, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Is that possible? And I remember a friend told me that she had told a friend that I'd done this, and they were like, oh, well, she must come from money. Yeah. Or she must have a lot of savings. And my friend was just saying, no, she was a teacher. She didn't. And they were like, huh. And it got people thinking, right? So I like that even that event in my life got people thinking that there's another way.
Yeah. Well, speaking of there being another way, I know that you have room for more clients.
Yes, I do.
So I'm curious if anybody listening to this podcast would be interested in speaking with you further about maybe taking a closer look at their finances and the alignment with their values and their goals. How can they reach you, or how can they learn more about you and what you offer?
So my website is justwealthplanning.com. And that's the best way to reach me. On my website, I am happy to talk with anyone. There's a free 30-minute introductory call.
Nice.
Where you can ask any questions you want. I want to make that call valuable to you. If I can provide any resource or advice in the moment, I can, and I will.
Great.
And if we're not going to fit to work together, that's what we can decide together during the call. And I have other planners and referral partners that I work with in the nonprofit space, but also in the in the paid space where I can refer you to. Right. So if cost is a barrier, I can make referrals to other professionals that might be able to serve you better.
Wonderful. And the resources that Phuong has referred to and her website will all be in the show notes. So I want to thank you, Phuong, for spending this time with me today and for sharing your journey so honestly with all of us. I think it was very instructive, and hopefully will get some people out there thinking about what they can do to find a closer alignment with the impact they want to make. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Tammy. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for being you.
All right. Oh, all right. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Phuong Luong. It was such a pleasure to speak with her and learn about her professional journey and the impact she has aimed to make along the way. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? Something you'll put into action this week that you'll benefit from for years to come? Share what resonated with you in the show notes at workfromtheinsideout.com. Look for episode 003. That's also where you'll find all the links and resources from today's podcast. If you enjoyed this episode with Phuong, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? That's great. I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase fulfillment and satisfaction in your work or other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you, and who knows, maybe you'll be a guest on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.